Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Dychronic, your host here on this Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be going over my best PvE specials for Destiny 2. And as always, this is a completely subjective list based on my own opinion of how I use these weapons and based on the DPS tests that I did with all of the weapons that I had in consideration. And this time around, we had 74 different weapons that use special ammo that was in consideration. And if you wanted to get your hands on this spreadsheet, it is a fully public spreadsheet available for anybody to use. All you have to do is head over to my Discord server, which is linked in the description down below, and on the channel hashtag D2Spreadsheets to find a link to this spreadsheet. However, making these spreadsheets are becoming increasingly difficult as my rent continues to come up, so please consider donating or pledging on Patreon. Again, link in the description down below. Without your support, I'm not going to be able to continue making them at the quality and the quantity that you see now. And for those of you who currently support me on Patreon, thank you. You are truly contributing to the reduction in my stress levels. And honestly, I may be able to keep my teeth for longer because I am grinding them a whole lot less thanks to you. And another great thing about my being able to continue doing YouTube, giveaways. Every single month I give away an Astro A40 headset, blue microphone product, and a gift code to the Control Freak store, and that is happening right now. It will end at the end of March, so check in the link in the description down below. And the very final note before we get into the main content, I apologize for taking so long on this, but this is a very important thing. What I've found in my testing for this season is that kinetic weapons seem to be doing 5% more damage than energy weapons to bosses. Now this could be just Callie of the Last Wish Raid where I do my testing, it could just be Last Wish Raid, it could just be the instances that I was testing in it, but from what it seems, kinetics do 5% more damage, and this has never happened before. Now we've been told by Bungie many times over the years that kinetics do 25% more damage to regular health enemies and energy weapons do 25% more damage to shields, and that's a really interesting dynamic. So you want your energy weapons to take out shields and then use your regular weapons to finish off the enemies, and this has been generally true. Ikelo's shotgun was always better at taking down shielded targets than the threat level version of it, and this disparagement between kinetic and energy weapons has never been seen on bosses before. Before they would literally do exactly the same damage, which made the math really simple for me. It was a whole lot of copy and paste, but now it's different, and it's fairly consistently kinetics doing more damage than energy weapons, with a few exceptions where for some reason the kinetic rapid fire shotguns did 12% more damage, and again I did a lot of different shots trying to make sure I landed all those bullets, and for some reason the precision frame shotguns energy weapons did 9% more damage instead. I don't know what's going on. I did a lot of different checks to make sure there was no differing variables, but there's something weird going on, and I think it's a bug. And I honestly combed the patch notes for this season, the last season, and everything between it, and I've not seen any instance that this should be true, but it is. And finally, apparently fusion rifles can now crit. If you shoot any of the bolts in the head, it'll do double the damage of any of the body shots, and I've never seen this before in my life. And I've done DPS tests for this game way past even Forsaken. I've been doing DPS tests, and never have I seen fusion rifles get up to a DPS that's in line with sniper rifles. And that is ridiculous, obviously, and should not be the case. So obviously there's a lot of weird stuff going on with my testing, so obviously take a lot of these damage numbers with a grain of salt. As we do more DPS tests over time, we can solidify our actual data. So just be nice with what's going on here. I'm a bit confused myself. Alright, moving on to the main content of this video, we're going to get into the spreadsheet. So you can see on screen now, this is my spreadsheet. Again, fully public spreadsheet. If you want access, it's on my Discord, and it is an incredible spreadsheet for a lot of different reasons, including all my perk recommendations for all the legendary weapons, where you can get each one of these. If there's a special quest for it, there's a link to it. If you're wondering about the catalyst, I have all the effects, where to get it, how to complete it, everything that I do know about from my recommendations for everything, all the way down. I love this thing because it truly is something that I would use if I weren't making it. And I honestly do use it while I'm actually playing, because I always forget what the catalysts are and how to get each one of them. And on top of that, for the PvE specials and heavies, I do DPS calculations. And you can see here on screen that there are a lot of different numbers to take into consideration. I even have adjusted RPM to adjust the RPM with a reload to incorporate that reload time into the actual RPM. There's a whole bunch of different stuff stuff going on. There's full ammo damage, DPS, and everything. Currently, it's organized by DPS. You can see the highest DPS weapons are at the top. You can see my rankings are not directly corresponding to those DPS numbers because there's a lot more going on than just damage per second. And in the bulk of this video, we're going to be going over broad categories of different weapons. We'll be talking about shotguns and shotgun archetypes in broad strokes rather than each and every single one of these weapons, and talking about why certain things deserve to be in the place they are. For example, my number one choice here is going to be Imperial Decree, and I have some pretty good reasons, even though it's like 10th down the list here. Alright, moving on, let's go ahead and get started. At the very bottom of the list, we have the special ammo grenade launchers. Now these things, as you can see with the DPS numbers, are very, very poor. Now the Mountaintop actually used to be a DPS king back in the Opulence DLC, but ever since we started having to reload, and you had to reload every single one of those 20 shots, the DPS has been much lower than it was before. Obviously, its total ammo damage is actually pretty decent, but the reason why it's so far down, including all these other ones, is going to be blast radius. Because if you have a radius, you can't have that much damage. Next up on the list, unfortunately, are going to be most of these sniper rifles. All of these 72 and 90 RPM sniper rifles are going to be pretty low, from 11 to 12,000 DPS, which is like less than half of a lot of these shotguns higher up on the list. And I gotta say, they should not have debuffed the sniper rifles. Now, at Shadowkeep, they buffed them with a 20% damage bonus, an extra crit modifier, and a generally just big buff to sniper rifles, and they were competing with shotguns, but not overtaking them. And for some reason, they forgot that it was a problem that nobody uses snipers, and then they went, there was never a problem in the first place, let's tank them all the way back down to the floor, and now look at these DPSs. It's very, very poor. Now that being said, yes, technically it is safer to use a sniper rifle over shotguns, but as you'll see up on this list, especially with the fusion rifles not being talked about yet, snipers are just not the choice now. Now, the last thing I will say about snipers before we move on is there's a couple of snipers, including the high RPM, the 140 RPMs, that did actually make their way into some pretty high slots, including a ninth spot at Distant Tunnelist. If you get firing line on the 140 RPM snipers, you can get the DPS to a pretty, respectable number. Next up, let's talk about the fusion rifles. Now, the fusion rifles are really weird right now because for some reason they're actually doing crit damage, as I mentioned before, but without doing a yellow number, they're just doing more damage if you shoot in the head. That being said, it's also not very likely you're going to get all bolts into the head, but currently they have some pretty nice DPS for a weapon that's very easy to use. A mid-range weapon, fusion rifles seem to be in a really good spot. Again, I have not done extensive testing on a lot of different targets, but you can see the DPS number is above a lot of snipers, and that's pretty impressive. And from what I can tell, the faster fire rate fusion rifles seem to have more DPS. So you can see here, like 13,000 DPS, you can see here closer to 15,000 DPS, Bastion at like nearly 17, and also Loaded Question at its proper place, the Fusion Rifle King at nearly 18,000 DPS. Again, right next to that sniper rifle that we saw before, technically above the best fusion rifle. And if you were wondering, by the way, how I calculated Loaded Question, basically I said, hey, let's say 1 out of maybe 3 shots will be the full reservoir burst damage, because you're gonna need to reload that to get the best bonus. So you could technically do better than this, but that seems to be an agreeable amount. Next up, in a kind of middle zone, just gonna touch on it very quickly, are gonna be the Trace Rifles, Divinity, Prometheus Lens, Cold Heart, and Wave Splitter. These are all just weird weapons. They have high full ammo damage, but not really a lot of DPS. For the most part, Divinity is at number 6 because it is so useful to give an enemy debuff and instant crits no matter where you shoot them. It's just an excellent weapon to have on your team no matter what you're doing. But outside of that, there's really not a lot of use because they don't have enough oomph or enough range. It just kind of seems like a weird middle ground. But currently doing better than a lot of snipers, so maybe they will take a turn. And they're also all exotic, which kicks out the heavy exotic. And finally, the best type of weapon for special ammo is gonna be the shotgun. You can see how many I have highlighted right now, and if you look at the top, you see shotgun, sniper, shotgun, 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 sniper, shotgun, 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 shotgun. You can see a lot of shotguns. Now, last season, I still pronounced shotguns to be the generally better DPS or better special than the sniper rifles. Even though Izanagi's Burden was the best by far, a lot of the other sniper rifles were still under a lot of the shotguns, which is a big reason why I kept saying that the sniper rifles didn't need that much of a nerf. How about like halfway in between? First and foremost, Fourth Horseman, a weapon that I thought was gonna have great DPS, is just way too hard to handle, does not have enough ammo, and without the catalyst, which I don't have the catalyst yet, I'll add the catalyst to the list once I actually get it, it's very poor. And being that it's an exotic means it's just not worth anything. Next up for the DPS numbers, I would say generally the 55 RPM aggressive frames and the precision frames are somewhere here in the worst part of the shotgun list without special perks on them. After that, you have the lightweight shotguns, which are doing surprisingly well these days. And then finally, the rapid fire are going to be here at the top with some pretty insane DPSs, like 27,000 to 24,000 kind of DPS is pretty high DPS, especially compared to some of these, which are closer to 17,000. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this, very specifically when it comes to trench barrel. Now, as you can see here, the rapid fire shotguns with trench barrel at the very bottom here are going to do less DPS but more total ammo damage. Now, the opposite is true for the aggressive frames. If you get yourself an Imperial Decree with trench barrel, the DPS goes up considerably and the full ammo damage is currently the highest total ammo damage out of any special in the entire game. I'm not kidding. A double damage Borealis still does not have as much total ammo damage as an Imperial Decree, and that's pretty impressive. And recently, in this current season, we have the very first lightweight trench barrel shotgun. What this means is that we now have a trench barrel option for lightweight shotguns, which are going to be a little bit in between both the aggressive frame and the rapid fire frame, meaning that it'll have good DPS and good full ammo damage. You can see that it's even higher than that of the Imperial Decree, but if you compare 400,000 total ammo damage with 540,000, I'd rather have that full ammo damage rather than just like an extra 1,000 DPS, which is why the Imperial Decree is going to be better than that new weapon, but that new weapon is going to look very good. On top of the fact that, again, this is a kinetic and this is an energy, so it does 5% more damage. I don't know why, but that's just what happens. And obviously they're different types. They're not the same frame at all. Now that's going to be the weapons in a very broad general scope of what is currently doing well. Let's take a look at the very special weapons, specifically a bunch of different exotic weapons and weapons that are kind of weird placement on the list. First of all, let's go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room here. Izanagi's Burden at ×4 Honed Edge technically is going to be the best DPS that you can do for any sniper rifle. So still, at 7th place, it is still a good weapon to use because it is effective at doing what it needs to do. Now, this is a ×4 Honed Edge with the catalyst, the best that you can possibly do. Still an effective weapon, but you can see here almost half the DPS that it had before. And this is due in part to the fact that it has a long reload time. That is the biggest thing that they did to Izanagi to tank the DPS, is the fact that nothing will affect the reload speed of the ×4 Honed Edge reload. So Lunafaction Rifts, Rally Barricades, Sniper Perks, nothing will make this reload faster, and that is precisely what I recommended to Bungie to do, but they also tank the damage of all the sniper rifles on top of that. Next up, I wanted to talk about Lord of Wolves. It was very close to being at #1. You can see the DPS as compared to the Imperial Decree is a little bit better, and the Release the Wolves version is even better on top of that, but the way they made Lord of Wolves be inaccurate, and if you haven't used it, basically you point in one direction and it just shoots like all around it. It doesn't bounce a lot. Instead, it just shoots in 7 different directions. And that makes it incredibly difficult to reach this maximum DPS because this is based on crit modifier. And in my opinion, you're probably better off just using the regular Lord of Wolves shot. At 24,000 DPS compared to 27, you're probably going to end up hitting more headshots in the first place with the regular Lord of Wolves version, making the Release the Wolves version completely useless, which to Bungie means you struck out. Which, when you look at the heavy weapons, being that Wish of the Worm is the best heavy weapon and best DPS weapon in the game by a decent margin, having an exotic in the special slot is just not really that great, which is why Imperial, in my opinion, is going to be better than Lord of Wolves. And the very last thing I wanted to talk about is going to be these top 2 exigent circumstances that honestly can just be wiped off the list because they're not going to happen very often, but they are going to be the maximum of what they can accomplish. Now, first and foremost, Borealis, if you don't know, there's a very special perk here called Ionic Return, allowing you to get double damage when you break a shield with the matching element, which is what this thing's about. And you can pick which element's on it just by holding down the reload button. And if you do that, the rest of the magazine will have double the damage, which puts its DPS and total ammo damage at a very high number. Again, full ammo damage is still less than that of the Imperial Decree with trench barrel, which is pretty impressive, by the way. And finally, threat level. Technically, threat level with the surrounded perk, with the surrounded spec, gives you 55% more damage with each shot, meaning you don't have to melee every 3 shots like you do with Trench Barrel, you just have 55% more damage. Now this is a very rare scenario because you have to be surrounded by 3 enemies to get this kind of bonus, but if you do, you'll have Izanagi style DPS, which again, this is what Izanagi did better than this. This is below what Izanagi did last season, and this is currently mind-boggling. So yeah, Izanagi needed to be nerfed, absolutely. And that's pretty much it. That is the general rundown of all the weapons in the DPS in this current video. Again, there's a lot of things I missed. You know, I didn't talk about Chaperone, I didn't talk about every single exotic in the game, I didn't talk about every single application for every single different thing. There's gonna be tons of different reasons you use different things, like Jotun. It's not a high DPS weapon, but has explosions, and it's also hits very hard, very quickly. So there's a lot of different reasons to use a lot of different weapons. It's honestly up to you. That is going to be my top 10. But anyways, that's going to be pretty much the end of it. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions, concerns, and if you could help me out with this debacle with kinetic versus energy, and if it's consistent throughout the world. Please let me know what your thoughts are. I will be trying to mitigate this issue in the future and doing the best that I can to make it an accurate spreadsheet. But that's it. My name's Dychronic. I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll see you guys on the next one.